Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our next talk is on the failure of online estate agents by Russell Quirk, who some of you may know founded one of the online estate agents which failed. So it's going to be a very interesting talk. I'll be listening intently. It's made no secret of the fact that I've never been a fan of online agents. Russell and I met on Twitter originally, I think, and then we met this time last year. PropTech.
You're gloating already, aren't you?
No, not at all, not at all.
I'll just push him off.
But anyway, without further ado, Russell Quirk on the failure of online estate agents. Thank you very much, Russell.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. So yeah, failure, not an easy thing to talk about, but something that by way of some weird therapy, really, I've taken to a few stages since the demise of eMoov to talk about. But the reason that failure up there is kind of in inverted commas is because I'm not sure that online estate agency has actually failed. Although, of course, over the last few months, with Hatched having been closed, eMoov and Tepelo closing, House Network, of course, going into administration, which was just a few weeks ago, and the rather big news last week, of course, that Purple Bricks, lo and behold, who's really surprised, have had to pull out of Australia and probably the US next, and of course have lost their CEO and founder. In fact, there isn't a single founder left in the online estate agency space. And some of you might say, Colby, well, yeah, there's not many online estate agents left either, so Colby's also not a fan. So look, I want to talk about the failure, inverted commas, of the sector, if I may. And look, I guess I'm pretty well qualified really to be able to talk about it. The fact that I founded eMoov back in 2009, I was very, very, very passionate about the prospects of the online estate agency sector and the fact that I thought it was going to be the next big thing. I mean, there was a logic to it, I suppose, that on the basis that estate agents are seen to charge quite a lot of money, if a proposition came along that was going to charge less and do a decent job, a version of the same job, that it should kind of work. And it kind of hasn't, so that's what I'm going to talk about. So failed. I failed. I'm a failure. It's a bit like a kind of Alcoholics Anonymous listing here, isn't it? I'm Russell Quirk and I've failed. I have made lots of mistakes, learned from them hopefully, and reinvented myself to a degree. But I'm not really here to talk about me so much as the space itself, the online space itself. Oh, another cynic in the audience. Hello, James. Okay, this big number here.
Okay.
35%. So I think back in 2011, 2012, whenever I was asked how big the online estate agency sector was going to get,
Yeah, Phil. Yeah, that one there.
Disintermediated by the internet, so if you look for travel, retail, insurance, banking, the level, at least the minimum level of market share of online protagonists was about 35%. So as a consequence, I believe by logic, and no, I wasn't lying, I genuinely believed that through logic, as a consequence of all that the internet would deliver in terms of efficiency, accessibility and so on, that online estate agents would take 35% of the estate agency market share. And I was completely and totally wrong, because it's 7%. So 15 years after the first online estate agency was born, which was House Network back in 2004, 10 years after I founded eMoov, and with the advent really of Purple Bricks in particular, when they came onto the market in 2014 and started spending £8 to £10 million a year on TV, Google ads and so on, despite the fact that they, eMoov, House Simple, House Network, Yopa, etc. have spent so far about £150 million on TV, radio, Google and so on. The sector has only mustered 7% market share, which I think is frankly astonishing, but it is a fact. It's 7%, according to Rightmove. 7% of all transactions are listed now by an online estate agent. So I guess that the question is, now we've seen the data, the facts, why has the online estate agency sector seemingly failed? And as I say, when I say failed, it's not to say that online estate agents will not exist in the future. I mean, I think they certainly will, but they're just not going to get to the same level of traction, same kind of level in terms of volume as some just prophesied. And here's why I think that is. There's basically three reasons. And look, if anyone violently disagrees with me, by all means, please put your hand up. You know, let's have a bit of discourse and a bit of debate. But this is why I think the sector that I was so passionate about is seen to be failing. So the first one is pretty obvious, really, competitor numbers. So when back in the day, 2008, 9, 10, there were only 3 of us as online estate agency participants. So that was House Network, Hatched, and eMoov. The job was a good one. It was easy because, of course, there was an appetite for what we were doing. We were growing in terms of market share, and we were kind of unopposed, really, because there were only 3 players. But as time went on, we kind of got to this, really, which was kind of lots of ferrets in a box, all fighting over the same morsel, really. This big one here trying to escape is purple grapes, I think, on the right-hand side there. So competitor numbers, frankly, got ridiculous. So at the last count, I think Rightmove say there's something like 55 online estate agencies in the UK. So the big ones that we all know, lots and lots of smaller ones. And of course, by online estate agent, I mean those that have a central location and are working on a kind of fixed, low fee basis. So the fact that we, as a sector, are all kind of pushing and vying for this kind of holy grail of growth. When there were 3, 4, or 5 of us, that was achievable. When there's 55 of you all trying to push in the same space for doubling in size in terms of annualised growth, it becomes impossible. And the second reason, cost of acquisition. The cost of acquiring a customer for an online sales agent, and I will differentiate here that there is a big difference between acquiring a customer as a sales agent, an online sales agent, versus an online lettings agent, on the basis, of course, that online letting agents have the benefit of customers as landlords coming back and hopefully recurring time and time again. The problem with online estate agents, from a sales perspective, is that not only has that cost of acquisition got bigger and greater, and basically all of the money's been shoveled to Google over the last few years, but it's just it's also been dominated by the fact that people are simply moving house less often. So in the old days, it was people moving house every 5, 6, 7 years. Now, as I understand it, it's something like 12 years. So the pool of people that you've got to acquire customers from has effectively shrunk. That was kind of our marketing policy, really. In fact, this is synonymous with our Monday morning marketing meetings. We just, excuse me for making light of it, but it is kind of therapy, really. We would effectively kind of go into the marketing room and just set fire to £10 notes and £50 notes. That's kind of how it felt. The money that was spent acquiring customers through, in particular, TV, radio, and Google, just became completely and utterly unsustainable. Just to give you an idea, just as a context, when I started in 2009-10, the cost per click of the term online estate agents in terms of a Google AdWord click was about £2. At the end of 2018, towards the end of eMoov, that cost per click was over £50. So there had been a 25x increase in the cost of a click for that, just that one key phrase. So imagine multiplying that as you're growing across the whole sector, and you can see why businesses like eMoov, Hatched, House Network, and so on, and actually the guys that are still standing, like Yopa and House Simple, are spending not hundreds of thousands of pounds a month, but in some cases millions of pounds a month just to acquire maybe 600, 700, 800 customers. It's completely and utterly unsustainable. And then the third thing, just to get a bit geeky for a second, is the psychology of pricing. I used to believe, as I said at the beginning, that it was very, very much a question that if something was cheaper, people would flock to buy it because it was better value. I actually now believe that the psychology of pricing, when something is too cheap and too good to be true from a perception point of view, as a consequence of that, people are suspicious about it. If they're suspicious about something, particularly if it's a service that people really value in terms of how long that transaction is going to take, the value of the thing being traded, i.e. the house, the importance of the service being really spot on in terms of selling a property well, looking after you as a client, getting the best price and so on. Actually, the opposite happens insofar as suspicion, meaning that people simply turn their back on the proposition. And I think that's why now we've got to a 7% market share as opposed to what we believe we would. And this, I think, illustrates it really rather well. There's a saying, isn't there? Pay cheap, pay twice. And even though actually I'm still an advocate of what some of the online agents did in terms of service, some of them delivered great service, some less so, but regardless of that, again, it's the perception that the consumer has that if I'm paying £800 to sell my home and that transaction is going to take 6 months, as opposed to what everybody else has been paying for years, which is typically £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, then I as a consumer believe that's probably not to be as good, and therefore I'm not going to go for it. And so the kind of early adopters, those that will always take a chance and be a bit more kind of risk, or have a risk appetite, they're effectively the people that have embarked upon being consumers for the online estate agency sector is concerned. So what now, in terms of where online estate agency goes? My last forecast, right at the beginning, I said 35%. As a consequence of me being completely wrong, I shouldn't really be in the business now of making further forecasts. I'm going to anyway. And this is what I think happens now. So, given the money that's been spent to expand online estate agency, and as we've said, where it has run out of steam effectively, I now believe that online estate agency, Charlie, Colby, you can like this bit, online hybrid estate agency from a low fixed fee perspective will never ever get a greater market share than 10% of UK estate agency transactions. I believe that that's the ceiling, for all the reasons that I've illustrated just now. So high street agents should kind of breathe a sigh of relief, I suppose, insofar as they're not now being disrupted, challenged, opposed, etc. But what I want to talk about briefly before Charlie kicks me off, how am I doing for time? Okay, thank you. As we're standing in an event that is all about technology and PropTech, what I've realised over the last few weeks and months is that a lot of people, particularly in the estate agency sector, the traditional estate agency sector, believe that because online estate agency has faltered, that as a consequence, that means that technology, and in particular PropTech, is less relevant. I don't think these two things are connected at all. In fact, online estate agents really have very, very little technology about them, really. And so just because online estate agency is not the thing that I and others thought it was going to be, that certainly doesn't mean that we can all sit back, particularly as traditional estate and letting agents, and believe that technology does not have a massive part to play, particularly from the consumer's point of view, in the way that we buy, sell and let property. So effectively, this is how I see it. That as an industry, a property industry, this also applies to mortgages, conveyancing and so on, the kind of attitude towards technology falls into these three categories really. There are those that have a kind of absolute ignorance of what's going on, the Luddites, the people that are burying their heads in the sand, countrywide, and so on. Two is those that know that they need to do something but do not know what to do, and then there's those that are actually doing something. And this is kind of how I think that splits. And I'd love to have some feedback from people who agree or disagree with me in terms of how this looks from the point of view of the property industry. So I believe that about 50% of estate agents in this country are burying their heads in the sand, ignoring technology, don't think it's a thing, and frankly, if we could go back from their point of view to the days of kind of black and white photocopies and Rolodexes, they'd be very, very happy indeed to do that. 40% of people, I think, know they need to do something. They know that they need technology, whether it's a CRM, whether it's something to help them with accessibility like Yondle, whether it's something that helps payments as a lettings platform, or whether it's something that helps visualise properties better. 40% I think believe that they need to do something, but really don't know what to do. And only about 10% are actually doing something. That's what I believe. Shameless plug here, you might have seen over the last 2 or 3 days there's been some news that I'm connected with a business called Vyom, and actually Vyom are the founders here, good to have their big hair. Vyom are a really, really good example of why technology is absolutely still a thing in property, despite the fact that online estate agency has kind of subsided a little bit. Vyom is a platform designed for prime and super prime London, both for agents and consumers, insofar as it being something that helps display those prime and super prime properties better than a regular, Register James here, ex-Rightmove, a regular premium listing or standard kind of portal approach. So, and look, the founders here, and actually Rajesh as well is as follows. So if you want to know more about Vyom and how it can articulate prime and super prime London properties, how you can share things like off-market links, which are very, very clever in the way that you can share things discreetly, then talk to those guys by all means. And that's what I'm doing now, shamelessly reinventing myself as a PR guy, which is why I now stand up doing things like this. So yes, reinvented, failing forward, I think they call it, and I'd like to think I've done that, from the ashes of something, creating something else. Questions? I'd love to know what people think about my philosophy on technology and where it's going.
Forgive me, as a passionate adversary of online agents, I'd like to kick this off. Well, one very important question for you. Can I have a show of hands in the audience of anyone who, if you had to use a plumber in your house, and the plumber came round to do the job, which is not a fun thing to do, have to have a plumber come around, which is usually a bad situation. Plumber comes around your house, and at the door he says, I tell you what, if you pay me up front, I'll do it for half the price. How many people would pay that plumber up front for the job? One hand, maybe two. Now, even in that scenario, the plumbers that took the money up front for half the price would probably not leave the house without doing some kind of job. But online agent function figures, and I think Colby, you might want to back me up, roughly 50% of online instructions, the money is taken at £800, the property is not sold. So my question is, as a founder of eMoov, and kind of on behalf of the online sector, as you said, you're still navigating for it, what would you say to vendors who paid that money and a year later haven't sold their house but they're out of pocket?
So I think that to believe that owners don't understand that dynamic is to kind of insult the intelligence of the seller, really. I think when someone chooses an online agent, albeit, as we said, it's a smaller number of people than we anticipated, they're doing it with eyes wide open. Most people understand or think they understand that their house is going to sell. If they're motivated to sell, and they're definitely going to sell, then it just becomes a matter of price. I'd venture that most houses that don't sell are simply because a combination of agent and seller over-enthusiasm on price has prevented such. But if you have to move, let's say you're moving 200 miles from your job, or it's a probate, so you simply have to sell. The property will sell. So on that basis, to pay up front for a service that ultimately will be delivered, I think is perfectly acceptable. I think what is not acceptable, mentioning no names insofar as my former competitors, is to give the impression that it is no sale, no fee, when it is not, by offsetting fees and giving the impression that you only pay when sold, even though you are paying regardless. So that fundamentally absolutely is wrong. But I think it's like with a lot of consumer things, Charlie, but it's you know, you pay your money, you take your choice. And if you want to take a punt, and I would even venture so far as to say that a lot of online estate agencies selling customers over the last few years have done exactly that, particularly when the market's been better. They've taken a punt. And yes, some people have not sold with that agent, but let's not forget the 50% that have, that from their point of view, inarguably, they have therefore saved money insofar as the fees that they would have otherwise paid to a high street agent. Unless you want to get into the debate insofar as whether online estate agents get the same price as traditional agents. We could do that another time, perhaps.
I don't doubt for 1 minute that you have a good intention to provide a service to sell a property at a reduced price. I don't doubt it for a minute. You very, very definitely avoided the question. I mean, if you were going to answer my question now, what you said is you're saying for those people who paid £800 and didn't sell, your answer is you paid your money, you take your chance. Now, I don't.
Yeah, but hang on, just be clear. There are other things that are paid for up front, like
first-time sellers who are uninitiated to the process. Now, that doesn't mean that they are stupid. It means that they don't understand the process. And most people who've sold a house would, hence 7% being the maximum market share, know that actually it's a big risky process, so you wouldn't pay money.
And I absolutely think that the consumer now, particularly as there's obviously been negative press around Bricks, eMoov, House Network, I think the caution, the danger of paying up front or committing up front and not selling, I think has been further accentuated, and I think that's a good thing. But just to be clear, some online agents have been very, very clear that you are paying up front regardless of outcome. Some have been less transparent as well.
I understand. Other questions?
About launching an online agency in a country where there's none. So, two of the criteria that you said that do not apply. First of all, there's no competition. Second, the cost per click is really probably £2 or maybe less. And I'm happy to take 10% of the market Great, that would be great. What advice would you, what would you do if you launch it in a new market without competition?
Yeah, good question. So what I would do, and there are some markets that haven't seen online hybrid estate agents yet. I think you've got to be, if you're first, you've got to get out the starting blocks really quickly, really fast, which means having a plan that's incredibly ambitious, that does definitely get you to 10% market share, assuming that's the ceiling, but it means you've got to raise shitloads of money. I mean, you'll have to raise 20 to 30 million dollars, depending on which market you're in, so that you get that fast start, so that you get that momentum. Inevitably, what will happen is, let's say you start in, you're not going to tell us what country it is, are you? Let's say Poland. It might not be Poland. It probably is Poland. So it's Poland. So what will happen in Poland is, once you start getting good press, because you want good press, that's PR after all, you will get, the bandwagon will start rolling. And so ultimately then, competitor 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 come along. The problem for eMoov, House Network and so on, and a lesson to be learned, is that we didn't raise anything like enough money early on. And we were then completely kicked down the road by Purple Bricks that came along and really understood acquisition, brand building, and how to build a business and a brand very, very quickly. So my advice would be, get some investors on board that are happy that you're going to emulate what Purple Bricks did in the UK, but you'd have to raise a lot of money.
Thank you. I've got a question over here. So let's check it here.
Thank you. Big fan of everything that you've done in the past. Followed eMoov for many years.
There is one. Thank you.
Yes. I've got to say, I think both of you got great points. Firstly, Charlie's point of paying up front and saying that ultimately you're giving the carrot straight away. After that, based on the fact that I understand that you built a business model which, in good faith, you pay us up front, we're going to provide you a service, and that's genuine and totally believable. The thing is, do you not feel that this market has potentially shot itself in the foot a little bit by, one, taking the money up front, high numbers not delivering on a sale for whatever reason, some people lazy, some people just not able to, or the wrong price, but also one of the competitors that you mentioned who I've had in my house personally, because there's no incentive, being in a sales market where people are normally rewarded based on a higher fee, the best you achieve, the better the fee. Once it's done, I found that quite a few of these guys have actually said, all right, we value your property at whatever it might be, but 20% below market value was in my case, and that's not because I think that my flat was worth a lot more, but it was valued a lot lower than any high street agent, because ultimately they want to show that they have successfully sold your property as quickly as possible. Do you not think that maybe the market shot?
But the reason for that might be something different. That might be, and all of the consumer research we did at eMoov pointed to this as being fundamentally important, and it's the question of local knowledge. It may well just be that the person from that particular firm that may or may not have a colour in its name, I would imagine it might be, that they simply didn't have the local knowledge to value your property correctly. I mean, I can't speak for other competitors of eMoov, but I can genuinely say that at eMoov, we didn't, bear in mind we had two propositions: you could pay up front, we could pay at the end. We were the first to introduce a contingency fee. It made no difference to us in terms of pricing. There were no conversations behind the scenes as to dealing with different types of client differently. At the end of the day, we wanted to sell as much as we could, so we ended up with customer satisfaction, which then would make the whole thing kind of roll in terms of the proposition tipping, based on reviews and so on. So I think that's probably more about local knowledge and ignorance. If you've got someone from 75 miles away coming to value your home, and perhaps has missed the mark just because of that. So yeah, I think it's probably more to do with that.
Just got time for one more question.
Just kind of a couple of clarifications about your presentation. So you mentioned some statistics there. 50% of the real estate agents, they don't know anything what's going on.
No, they're not stats. That's my supposition.
Okay, assumptions. That's one. Okay, clear. The second, you mentioned 10% online.
Ceiling.
Yeah, that ceiling. What do you include on online? What's the definition? Just
so the definition. So to me, the definition is somebody that doesn't have multiple branches and someone that's charging a fixed low fee. That to me is the definition. The online label is a complete misnomer. Every agent in the UK that's on Rightmove or Zoopla is an online agent. Everyone with a website is an online agent. But it's just that unfortunately way back in, whatever, 2005, 6, 7, 8, the fixed fee estate agency sector was characterised as being the online agency sector.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a misnomer.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Russell. Time to move on, but thank you very much.
Pleasure.